This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so let's get started. So today's topic is navigating legal issues that are arising from COVID-19. And we're going to cover a variety of topics today. The first topic has to do with questions that I have been receiving from clients about the 2020 stimulus payments that the government has been making. Now, for people who receive financially sensitive government benefits, such as Medicaid, HUD housing, which is Section 8 reduced housing, or might be receiving supplemental security income benefits, these people must stay within a certain asset level as well as a certain income level. So it's become very important to understand how do these government agencies view the receipt of the stimulus payment. So the good news is that it does not cause any kind of change to their income or even their patient responsibility if they're on Medicaid, meaning that none of these government agencies, HUD, DCF, or Social Security, none of them are counting the stimulus payments as income or a resource for 12 months from the date of receipt. So somewhere within that year, the individual either needs to spend it, or if they choose not to spend it, but perhaps they have a special needs trust or a pool trust, as long as they're under age 65, they could add their stimulus payment check to the special needs trust or the pool trust, and then it's actually going to be an exempt resource beyond the 12-month exception period. So this is really important and great information for people receiving government benefits. Now, recently, I have been getting calls and getting questions from emails from people saying that some residential facilities, meaning primarily skilled nursing facilities, are telling patients that the resident has to turn over to the facility their stimulus payment. So I'd like to talk about this for the next few minutes. If you hear this, if you experience it, if you know somebody that's encountering this, the first thing you want to suggest to them is that they file a complaint with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is the federal agency in Washington, D.C. that oversees both our Medicare program as well as our Medicaid program, because facilities are not allowed to demand or require a resident to turn over the stimulus payment, even if the resident happens to be a Medicaid recipient. It is the benefit that belongs to the resident, given by Uncle Sam. They don't have to share it with anybody. Now, because this is an issue that is spreading around the country, this is not just happening in Florida, it has been brought to the attention of CMS, and CMS has issued a memo letting facilities know that if they attempt to do this, they are going to be terminated from the Medicare program and or the Medicaid program. So this is a very serious violation. Some of the advocacy groups located around the country that advocate for the rights of elders, as well as the rights of individuals who receive government assistance, are suggesting that it might actually violate another federal law that protects nursing home residents from being financially exploited. So the other thing that you can do is every county has what is called a long-term care ombudsman. They are appointed to that position by the governor of each state, and their primary role is to be an advocate for individuals that are in nursing facilities. So for example, if you hear or feel that a nursing home resident's rights are being somehow violated, you can make a call to the long-term care ombudsman office in your county, and they will go and investigate. The ombudsman has authority to go to a facility unannounced, meaning they don't have to call beforehand, they don't have to make an appointment. They also have free access to the residents' records as well as the records of the facility. So they occupy a very important position and role in our community to help protect the rights of people in skilled nursing facilities who may, due to incapacity, be unable to protect themselves. The next follow-up question that I have been receiving is whether a person's Medicaid benefits can be terminated during this pandemic. Now, I'm going to take you back a couple of months, and one of the first new laws that Congress passed toward the end of March is called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, FFCRA. And it's very relevant to this question. So the answer is that if somebody was found eligible for Medicaid assistance as of March 18th of this year, then that individual remains eligible throughout this pandemic, regardless of whether there is a change in circumstances. So let me explain what this means. Under the federal and state Medicaid law and the rules, there is a law that says it is the responsibility of a Medicaid recipient to notify the Medicaid agency within 10 days when there is a change in their financial circumstance. A change in financial circumstance might be that their income increased. It could be that their resources increased either because they came into an inheritance that was unexpected, or perhaps they were injured and now they're getting a settlement from a lawsuit. So those are just a few examples of when people's resource levels change. So whenever a change in circumstance occurs, it is the responsibility of the Medicaid recipient to report it. Here in Florida, we report it to the Department of Children and Families, DCF. Now, what the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is saying is even though a change in circumstance has occurred, because this virus is affecting everybody, every age, every nationality, there's no distinguishing characteristics, we need to make sure that people have health insurance coverage. So they're going to stay on their Medicaid. Now, there's no definitive time frame for when this protection ends. So I have a couple of suggestions. My first suggestion is that if you're speaking with somebody and they say, I've had a change in income or I've had a change in resource, rather than have them put that issue on the back burner and wait, please recommend that they go get qualified legal advice from an elder law attorney so that they know what their options are and they can choose a planning option that's best for them to make sure that when this emergency ends and we go back to the normal rules, that they will continue to remain financially eligible for the Medicaid program. I do think that when this emergency ends, the government agencies are going to be taking a closer look at individuals to make sure they remain financially eligible, especially anybody who during this time is up for their annual renewal, or what we call their annual recertification process for Medicaid. So because I'm anticipating that we're going to be at this point sooner or later, I do recommend that any Medicaid recipients keep good documentation about their assets, about their income, so that they're ready when they get a notice from DCF telling them it's time to go through your recertification process. And the same suggestion would apply to anybody that is serving as a trustee of a special needs trust or a trustee of a pool trust. We don't want to get lackadaisical and forget about keeping good records. It's important to keep those records up to date throughout this entire pandemic. Now, a few weeks ago, I gave a webinar in June talking about the problem that we're having not only in Florida, but in other states across the country with elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. And that webinar focused on how to identify signs of abuse, neglect, and exploitation and how to counteract it. But today, what I'd really like to talk about is how can we help families who are in a position of having to cohabitate due to the pandemic. And it might unfortunately give rise to situations of elder abuse. So let's talk through what we can do because we don't know how long we're going to be in this situation for. So I think the first place to start is recognizing that we're all used to having our own physical space. And we might not right now have the luxury of having our own space. We might have to share it, and that might then reduce the amount of space we have to live in, to sleep, to eat. So I think it's very important that families talk about what is everybody's personal space requirements, and so everybody can respect one another, which helps us avoid getting upset, losing our temper, and perhaps saying things that we can't take back. It's also important that we talk calmly, and probably more important than talking and expressing ourselves is the ability to listen to one another and do it in a way that's mindful, which shows your other family members you've really heard them. And a great tool for this is after you've heard what the other person has said, repeat back to them. And that way they're going to tell you if you heard them correctly or if there was something they said that was important but you missed it. After you've gone through this process of one person's speaking, the other person's listening, and each person has had their opportunity to change, then it's important to validate. What did you, as the listener, hear? Now, you might not agree with the other person, but validating is about trying to be in the other person's shoes and understand how they see things through their eyes and how it affects them. So validation is a very important part of having effective communication. Now, during this time when some of us must stay indoors, others have the opportunity to perhaps escape for a few hours and go to a physical office to work and then return home. It's really important to create a balance. So you want to bring in things like fun activities that the family can do together, engaging in hobbies, finding interests to share. Humor is so important. I think that humor gets us through very difficult times, whether it's a time that we're ill, a time that we might have lost our job, or something has happened that has completely changed the course of our lives. Being able to find that moment when we can laugh and get those endorphins spread throughout our body is so important for our mental health as well as our physical health. And I think it also brings us back to being grounded and remembering the things that are really most important to us, to our families, to our support network, the things that keep us together, and realizing that some of the other things weren't so important. And for this short duration, we can probably put less emphasis on them. Because many of us are sharing a physical space, it's also important to talk about chores. What is needed to be done around the house to keep the house clean and, from a safety perspective, keep everybody healthy. So it's a great idea to sit down and talk about how to share in making this happen. And for the person whose home is being volunteered, it's an opportunity for that person to share how exactly they would like the cleaning or the chores to be done. So there's not unsaid or unrealistic expectations, and there's a greater probability that everybody can hopefully work well together. So I'd also like to share some suggestions about how to lower the risk of financial exploitation occurring during this time that families and extended families are cohabitating together, whether it's a set of parents or grandparents residing with their adult children, whether it's young adults who now had to come home from college, or perhaps they lost their jobs, so they've come home to live with their parents. It doesn't really so much matter the age relationship, but again, we want to be respectful of one another. And most importantly, we want to avoid there being misunderstandings as well as unsaid or unrealistic expectations about finances. You know, somebody who owns the home might say, okay, now they're coming to live with me. Well, they should pay rent, or they should contribute to the mortgage, or perhaps they should help to buy food for the household. And these are all valid concerns, but it's about having an open dialogue in a way that allows for the exchange of ideas without having a heated argument. So my first suggestion is that whoever it is who's volunteering their home provide the documentation as to what is it costing for utilities or rent or mortgage, and then opening up the dialogue to talk about contribution. Who's going to contribute, as well as what are they able to contribute? You know, somebody who's lost their job as a result of being terminated due to the coronavirus may or may not yet be getting their unemployment benefits. It's been a very hard road for many people to even be able to file. So we want to be understanding, we want to take that into account, and you know, there may be other ways to make up for that time frame when a person can't financially contribute, but perhaps they can do something else to help around the house. We also want to be mindful of assumptions or tendencies we might have to perhaps assume that an older adult, meaning a parent or a grandparent, should show us their financial statements in order to prove what they're capable of contributing. So again, be mindful of your own assumptions and try to come to this discussion from the point of view of being respectful, that we want to respect each other's privacy just like we would want our privacy to be respected. And we can't necessarily demand that somebody who's now living in our household has to show their confidential financial statements. Now, I always try to look for the silver lining in challenging times and to see opportunities, to see that the glass is half full rather than the glass is half empty. And so one of the opportunities of us being brought together closer with our family or our support network is to have a discussion about something that is not always comfortable to talk about, which is whether somebody has made a legal plan so that should they become incapacitated, there are legal documents that allow a trusted person to make financial decisions as well as make healthcare decisions. And what better time than now to have this talk. So I do suggest that if you learn that a family member who's cohabitating with you does not have in place a durable power of attorney or even medical advance directives, this is the best time. You can't pick a better time to put these documents in place. We don't want people to run the risk of becoming incapacitated, and then it's too late to have them sign these documents, and we have to sit down and talk about a guardianship, meaning to go to court and have you appointed as their legal guardian so you can access their accounts, pay their bills, or make their medical decisions. And although we're talking in terms of you having these conversations with your family members, I want everybody who's listening today to be my role model and make sure that you have these documents in place for yourself. Because if they see that you've done this, they're more likely to follow in your footsteps. Now, we're going to move on to a question that I have been asked almost every week since March 13th. I do represent individuals that are in assisted living facilities, rehab facilities, skilled nursing facilities, and whether they were there temporarily before the governor closed the state or they were there on a more long-term basis, the one question that has arisen is, should I take my loved one home during the COVID-19 crisis? So we're going to walk through a process of evaluating the pros and the cons and what the options are. So my first suggestion is, if you're able to communicate with your loved one, whether it's through telephone, FaceTime, or some sort of a video conferencing system, have you had a conversation to find out whether they want to leave, or is the question really coming from you? So I'm trying to look at it, putting aside for the moment that we are in this virus crisis situation. And if we didn't have the virus, would your loved one still continue to feel safe in the facility, or would they want to leave? So I think if you have the opportunity to have the dialogue, that is the place to begin. The next question to ask is, if you did take your loved one out of the facility, will the facility accept him or her back when this pandemic is over, when it's considered safe, or when we have a vaccination that is effective against the virus? The next thing you want to ask is whether your loved one is receiving Medicaid assistance. And in particular, if your loved one is in a skilled nursing facility and they are on Medicaid, if they're going to come to your home, we then need to notify the Department of Children and Families and get approval for what's called community Medicaid benefits. So it's a different Medicaid program than the skilled nursing program. It still has all the same financial eligibility requirements. However, we do have a rule called the transition rule in Florida that says if somebody has been residing continuously in a skilled nursing facility for 60 days or greater, then they don't go on a waiting list for the community Medicaid program. They will immediately begin to receive services. Now, they still have to go through a medical evaluation process in order to determine how many hours a week of Medicaid home health aid services are going to be approved. So we also have to consider what is the level of care and how much care does your family member need? And how much time each week is Medicaid going to approve for home health aides? And also, will they provide, if necessary, a visiting nurse to provide nursing services? We also need to think about whether your home is ready. Is it equipped to meet the needs of your loved one, or is it capable of being modified? For example, if your loved one is having difficulty walking and they depend on a wheelchair, the first thing you want to be thinking about is the opportunity and the expense of installing a wheelchair ramp in order to get into the house. Then you want to be looking at issues such as, are the doorways wide enough to enable the wheelchair to get through, not just in the front door to the home, but going down hallways. Are the doorways, for example, into the bedroom wide enough? Is the doorway into the bathroom wide enough? And if they're not, can they be modified? So you may need to have a general contractor come in to look at your home and give you their evaluation and their recommendations. And getting back to the issue of care and services, Medicaid with its community Medicaid program is not financially capable of providing round-the-clock care like somebody receives in a skilled nursing facility. So for the hours that Medicaid does not provide coverage, you want to ask yourself, are you able to provide personal care services? And if you're not, because you have to work or you might be going out of the house to work, will you be able to hire a home health agency to provide those additional hours that Medicaid will not cover? Now, I know that these can be daunting questions that you're being asked to evaluate, but to help you through this process, I think it would be very beneficial to work with a care manager. So a care manager is somebody who has either a degree and experience as a nurse or as a social worker and has worked with a geriatric population. So they will be very helpful to do an assessment of your loved one, of your home, and come up with a plan so you know, is this realistic for me to try to take my loved one home during this crisis? Can I meet their needs? And I think after you answer all these other questions, one of the most important questions is to try to evaluate what is the risk of exposure to the virus. Should your loved ones stay where they are based upon all the increased testing that is now being required of facilities, in testing all staff, in testing all the residents, compared to what is their risk of exposure if they come to your home? Who is coming in and out? Where are those people going? Have they been in large groups? Have they visited indoor restaurants? Only you can answer those questions in order to determine, is it safer for them to stay where they are for now? Is it safer for them to come home? And perhaps this is a question that is not a definitive question, but one that is constantly evolving, that you might reevaluate as we have more information from the CDC. One of the other questions that I have been asked quite frequently since the quarantine began is whether this is a good time for people to make or change an estate and incapacity plan. So when I say estate plan, what I mean are documents that allow people to pass on their wealth at their demise. This would be a last will and testament or a revocable trust agreement. The phrase incapacity plan is kind of a strange way of describing documents that allow people to choose a trusted person to make their medical or financial decisions, so that when they become incapacitated, these decisions can be made in a very private way that does not involve going to court or having information become more publicly available. So it's not that we want to plan to become incapacitated, it's that we want to have a plan to address our needs should we become incapacitated. So my answer to this question is there's no better time than now. We don't have a crystal ball. I certainly can't say how long we're going to be in this challenging time for. And as long as we take precautions and we're all careful, I think that this can be done in a very safe way. So I'd like to walk you through what I'm doing here at my office and what many elder law attorneys across the country have been doing since March in order to help their clients create or change their plans. So today you're attending this webinar through a software called GoToMeeting, which is both secure and encrypted, and it's private, so not anybody can just join in. And so this is how I've been doing my client meetings since March, where I can see my clients, especially somebody who's older. I'm able to read their facial expressions and their body language in order to tell whether they're understanding what I'm explaining, or maybe I have to change the way I'm explaining a legal document to them. Now, I do highly suggest using a large screen as opposed to a cell phone, because a cell phone is going to give you a very limited area to view me or whoever you're having the video conference with. The larger the screen, whether it's a monitor for a PC or a tablet, it's just going to provide, I think, a better visual and also put the person at more ease to go through this process of not quite being in person in the same room. I do suggest that before the conference, you make a list of your questions. Perhaps you read something in a newspaper article or on the internet. Write it down. Also write down any concerns you have. So if there's some unique family dynamic, for example, that you think is going to affect the legal plan, write it down so you remember to share it with me or the attorney that you consult with. And most importantly, write down what are your goals? What is it that you want to achieve by coming to me? It might be, for example, that you want to provide for a beneficiary who has a disability, or you want to make sure that if you pass away first, that your spouse is properly taken care of. Write down your goals. That helps me tremendously be able to know, out of all the options I can offer you, which are the best ones that are tailored to meet your goals and your concerns. It's also very important to share with the attorney when you're setting an appointment whether you have any kind of auditory hearing impairment or a visual limitation, because this will enable us to try to find ways to optimize the conference being as effective as possible. So if somebody has an auditory impairment, we want to know, do they wear a hearing aid? If they do, to please make sure that a new battery is in it before the date of the conference. If the person does not use a hearing aid, then we might suggest that they go see an audiologist so that we can have an effective communication rather than the person saying, "What, I didn't hear you." If there's a visual limitation, we'd want to find out if the person has glasses that helps them. If not, Are they comfortable just being able to use their auditory senses to have the conference? So again, we're trying to find ways to accommodate people just like we did when we were able to host clients here in the office. Another important thing to remember as you prepare for your conference is to locate any copies of your existing legal documents. Even if you think they're too old, they're 20 years old, it's really important to show them to the attorney, because any new documents that we create for you may have to specifically refer back to that prior document and state that you are canceling it, you are revoking it. So having those prior legal documents is very important, even though you might be changing your decisions. So please take the time to locate those, whether they might be kept in your home or perhaps you put them in a safe deposit box. And because this is new for a lot of people to be using a video conferencing system, we want you to be as comfortable and as relaxed as possible. So have something to drink nearby. When you need a short break, just tell the attorney. If you need to get up and stretch and walk a little bit because you might have some nervous energy, that's okay too. We understand that this is a different process and it might take just a little bit longer than it used to when we were able to meet with clients in person. So that leads us to the next question, which is, what happens after the meeting? How am I actually going to sign the legal documents? And it's a great question. So I'm going to share with you my firm's signing and safety procedures that we've been implementing since March. And this has been a very fluid process, one that is constantly changing depending on the information that we get from the Center for Disease Control. So before we schedule the signing, what we're going to do is we're first going to email the client copies of the documents that we've prepared, or if they prefer by fax or mail. These days, the mail does not seem to be as on time as it was 4 months ago, so it could take a little bit longer if your preference is to receive the copies by regular mail. Once you receive them and you have a chance to review them, we're going to schedule a second video conference where you'll have the documents in front of you. I will have them on my screen, and we will go through each document that's been prepared to confirm that it's what you want and that you haven't changed your mind or perhaps changed a decision. We're also going to talk about the process of the actual signing. So I will talk you through and tell you what page to look at, where either you're going to initial or you're going to sign your full name. So we're going to go through that entire process so that you have a comfort level. And on the day that you actually come to the physical office, you'll know what to expect. When you arrive at the office, we're going to ask what have become standard questions that the CDC recommends. So first, we're going to ask if you've experienced any symptoms of COVID-19, whether it's a high temperature or respiratory issues. We hope that if you are experiencing that you just call us and say this isn't a good time. And we want you to stay home, get the care you need, and be safe. We're also going to suggest that clients take their temperature the morning of the day that they're coming to the office for the signing. Again, these are safety precautions to keep you healthy and to keep us and our families healthy. We're also going to respectfully ask you to confirm that you've not been with a person who did test positive for COVID. And if you have been with somebody who's tested positive, we're going to delicately ask if you've been tested and if your test results were negative. We want to reduce any possibility of you being a carrier when you come into the office. It is also a requirement that you wear a mask, and all of us, my staff and I, are going to be wearing masks as well throughout the entire signing process. Now, I have a small reception room in my suite, and that is separated by a glass window from the main part of the office. So we'll have you remain in the reception area, and you will be able to see us through the open glass window as we pass the documents to you on a clipboard. In the reception area, there is hand sanitizer we hope you will use, and there will be a pen provided which you will take home with you rather than leave there on the table. So although you'll only see us from our eyes up to the top of your head, I want you to know that we are smiling at you. We're proud of you for making or updating your legal documents, and we will copy everything that day, and you will be able to take your documents home at the end of the signing. We, of course, keep scanned copies of your documents so that should you call and have a question, we can easily bring your documents up on the computer to answer your questions. So I'd like to invite everybody to join me for our next webinar, which is Friday, July 10th, again at 12:30 p.m. for solutions and best practices to senior living issues, what the evolving future looks like. And I'm co-presenting this with Advocare Care Management. These are nurse care managers that work with individuals who are facing some of the issues we talked about in today's webinar, whether they're at home, perhaps in a hospital, a rehab, or a facility. And we have a new way of registering for these webinars. You can go to the firm's website, to the events page, and we have a calendar listing with the dates of each webinar. And when you click on the webinar you'd like to see, it will bring you to a registration form to complete, and we will then send you the link to join the webinar. You can also go to the firm's website and register to receive our document checklist. And when you do that, you will automatically get a 20% discount on either an estate planning consultation or a long-term care planning consultation. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. You're welcome to either unmute your microphone or you're welcome to type a question into the chat box. Okay, I see a question has just appeared. Actually, not a question, just a comment thanking me for today's webinar.
Yeah, hi, it's Mark Bondi.
Hi, Mark.
I just wanted to say thank you. I wished I would have heard some of this advice a while ago. I'm a little behind on some of it, but it is good to get up to speed on some of the terms and the language, and so that's a big help.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Although sometimes we learn information that we wish we would have known earlier that we could have used for our older adults in our family, there's still the opportunity to use the information for ourselves so that we make better choices. So again, always look at it as the glass is half full.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're definitely going to take advantage of that. Yes.
Wonderful. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question or share a comment about today's topics?
I just wanted to thank you again, Stephanie. It's always great information. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce. I always appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, stay safe and have a nice trip. And hope your daughter has a nice summer.
Thank you, Bruce.
Bye-bye. I'll talk to you soon.
Is there anybody else that has a question? All right, well then I'd like to thank everybody for joining me today for the webinar. And I hope you all have a safe and relaxing July 4th. Take care of yourselves, take care of your family, and I hope to see you all soon.
Yes, have a good drive and stay safe.